Hello and welcome to today's 10-minute episode of The Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist payroll and HR recruiters.
Now today I'm joined by global communications consultant, TEDx speaker, trainer and accomplished author, Heather Hansen. If there was one kind of top secret that you could share, which helps all businesses or all leaders to achieve really successful global communication in this new world of work that we're part of, what would that top secret be?
Wow, that is catching me off guard. And that's a huge question. The top secret. I would have to say it has to do with staying open-minded and having a growth mindset. So being able to listen openly, not judge, stop our fast thinking brains from categorizing and coming and jumping to conclusions, but just sitting back, relaxing, listening, and really trying to understand what people are saying without passing that judgment or trying to decide what your own response will be to that. And if we could start right there by understanding, our own preferences and how we see the world and how it's different from others, and being a lot more open-minded and more globally minded, I think that would get us a huge step in the right direction.
I think even within that answer, we have to talk a little bit about bias, I think, today, because I think that comes into that conversation. Certainly inclusivity, but also the psychology behind language. So let's start with the inclusion element, because this is something that our listeners are really passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit more about the relationship between linguistic diversity and inclusion, and how understanding that relationship may be really beneficial for the HR directors and leaders that are listening to the show?
Yes, this is a topic that really isn't talked about enough. So I'm really happy you're bringing it up and asking. So thank you for that. I think what we fail to recognize, especially in native English speaking environments, is how privileged we are to have been born into this language. Yeah. We have this language as our native language. We are comfortable. We are confident. We don't have to translate. We can just speak. And sure, we lose track of our words every now and then, but we don't have the same insecurities as someone who's coming to the table with it as a second, third, fourth, fifth language, or however many languages they speak. And so just right off the bat, there's an element of privilege that we have in the global economy because we are English speakers. Going a step beyond that, within just our native English speakers and also including non-native international speakers of English, we have a lot of bias, as you pointed out, right? There's bias in everything, and there's a lot of bias in language. And if I'm from America, so I could talk about Southern American English, the South, New Yorkers, New Jersey, Boston, California. And for me, each and every one of those accents brings up an immediate response in my mind, a feeling in my body, an emotion, and an idea about those types of people. And I know in the UK, this is definitely true.
Absolutely.
That depending on where people are from and how they sound, immediately, and you have a judgment, an idea of who they are, how educated they are, how much money's in their bank account, what color their skin is. You can come to a lot of conclusions from the minute you hear a voice and how they speak. And that we know has huge impacts on inclusion in the workforce. We know that it's holding people back from being hired, just straight off the bat, not getting hired, keeping them back from being promoted. In legal systems, we're finding judges sometimes aren't granting parole or are judging people incorrectly. Jurors are judging witnesses based on the way they sound and not trusting them, not thinking they are credible because they have an accent that's different than their own. And this is just within native speakers. This isn't even bringing in people who have, a French accent on English or a German accent on English. That gets even more complicated because think of all the movies you watched growing up. Think of the cartoons you watched. The bad guys always have an accent. It's never the good guys with the accent. It's the bad guys that are the foreigners, right? And that trains us and enculturates us from a very, very young age to give us different feelings about these different accents and who belongs in our tribe and who doesn't. And that plays out every single day in offices across the world.
Just from listening to what you said there, you used the accent for always being the bad guy in a movie. Now you've mentioned it resonates, and that's obvious. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But why haven't I identified this before? And I've had a few conversations with professionals like yourself that are really passionate about taking this to businesses to make them more aware. But I've worked in HR recruitment for nearly 20 years, and the idea of linguistic inclusion isn't something I've necessarily considered, and maybe subconsciously I've been aware of it, or I don't know. But when you talk about it in the way that you just did so eloquently, and when you highlighted some great examples, instantly my mind's going all over the place. I'm picking up on everything you've said and gone, God, that's sometimes how I viewed things, particularly with the bad guys. I haven't noticed it, but it's maybe it was obvious. But why?
Think of every Indiana Jones movie, right? Or you know,
right.
all of the action films, or and it's funny as well when you look at Hollywood films, the way British accents come into play. They're either a villain or they're like the sexy doctor, you know. I mean, it just depends, and our relationships with accents change over time as well, depending on the geopolitical landscape. Who are the current global villains? You know, if you look in the past, up to the Cold War through the 90s, you know, as we came out of that, it was always the Russian bad guys, the German bad guys, and I mean, now we're going full circle, but we see this play out in our media and in what we're fed on TV from a young age. So it's a little scary. How
conscious are business leaders? Because I wasn't aware of this this element as much as you brought it to the surface now. So how conscious are business leaders, HR professionals listening to this, aware of this inclusive piece that is clearly very relevant?
They're not.
And what are we doing to tackle it?
Yeah, they're not aware of it. If we look at diversity and inclusion policies, most of them are not touching on specifically language and accent, which are huge. They're probably, this is one of the last remaining areas of discrimination that's totally acceptable. You know, just recently, this is actually really interesting. I just read an article about a company that just got $35 million in funding. Really cool technology. It's basically accent translation.
Okay.
So imagine a photo filter or a video filter, Zoom filter, that I could show up and be black, or someone who is black could show up and be white. I don't think we'd ever support that. I think we'd look at that and say, why would they want to show up as white? Why would they do that? Why would they go to an interview and put on a white person filter and why would they do that? And yet that's what this technology is doing. It's saying that if you have a foreign accent or a different accent, you can basically choose from hundreds of varieties of English, and you can press a button and you can sound like me, General American, or you can sound like RP, Queen's English, or you can sound like you come from a very specific place. I can make my accent sound exactly like yours so that you feel connected to me and you do not have bias against me. And I'm really split on that. I think that's a little bit scary because it's allowing us to allow these biases to continue. And it just shows what a lack of awareness we have about this being really wrong. You know, that we have tech companies that are raising millions of dollars to develop this kind of technology. And I don't even think they're aware. They're all non-native speakers. They've all experienced accent bias. So they are saying, you know, we're empowering people because finally they won't be judged by the way they speak. But at what cost? They have to give up their identity. I mean, our accents tell an entire story about us. So I find it really sad. And I think it also points to the fact that, no, we really aren't aware that this is going on. We aren't aware of what the repercussions are. We don't see it happening in the workplace. We can easily say, no, I can't hire that person. You know, they're just too hard to understand, don't have good communication skills. When really it's tied to ethnicity and race and someone being foreign and not local or whatever the case may be. So it goes a lot deeper than what we're hearing today.
Well, I think based on the way you've articulated that, I'm in your camp. For me, it sounds like you're putting a Band-Aid on a tumor, right? So you might cover the cut or something that shows, but it doesn't really treat the actual problem, which is the discrimination that happens right at the other side of it. If someone is discriminating based on an accent, you might be able to mask it through software, but ultimately when they get that job, those discriminations, those prejudices are going to start resurfacing again. We haven't overcome them. I think I've got a similar view when it comes to my world of recruitment, which is a lot of people and tech companies now are removing names from CVs. And I understand the logic, I can understand it, but actually there's so much identity, embroiled in a name. Why would you want to mask your identity, your culture, your background? When that person gets the job later on down the line, those discriminations that were preventing that person potentially from getting the job because of that name are going to resurface again. We're not really solving the problem, which is education and inclusion, which I'm clearly very passionate about. And I think I'm in the same camp as you with that software. It's I can understand it from a surface level, why it may be popular, why they may get funding, but actually it's not really solving the problem.
They're going to earn a ton of money off of it. The investors are very smart because they are monetizing our natural bias. And that's a gold mine.
Just need to say one more huge thank you to Heather Hansen for joining me today. And thank you to all of you for listening to this show. And I look forward to bringing you the next episode real soon. Thank you. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks so much, Nick.